Hello everybody, good evening. A very warm welcome for today's evening's event. Prakriti Foundation is very happy to present the book launch of Between Hope and Despair by Rajeev Bhargava. Rajeev Bhargava was born in 1954 and educated in Delhi and Oxford. He is currently an honorary fellow at the Center for the Study of Developing Studies, Delhi, and the director of its Parekh Institute of Indian Thought. He was also the center's director from 2007 to 2014. He has taught at the University of Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Bhargava has lectured, taught and held visiting professorship at several universities. He has been a fellow at Harvard University, University of Bristol, Institute of Advanced Studies and the Institute for Human Sciences. Bhargava's work on individualism and secularism is internationally acclaimed. Bhargava comes into his own when he is in the classroom, lately by contributing regularly for The Hindu. He has also become more publicly engaged. Vaishna Roy, who will be in conversation with him today, is the editor of Frontline, the fortnightly news magazine from the Hindu group. Today the book will be launched by Mr. Sriram Panchu. Mr. Sriram Panchu has been in the forefront of mediation movement of India and is an internationally recognized Indian mediator. He is an alumnus of Government Law College, Bombay. His field of law practice is constitutional and commercial law and has appeared pro bono in several significant public interest cases. For almost 30 years, he has been in the forefront of mediation movement of India. In 2005, he set up India's first court-annexed mediation center at the Madras High Court and has assisted the Supreme Court and other high courts to do so. He has trained over 1,000 mediators. I humbly invite all three of them on the stage, please.
With great pleasure. Pose for the photograph, come Vaishna. Thank you. Rajeev Bhargava, Vaishna Roy, friends, it's a pleasure to be here and to launch the book, Between Hope and Despair. And I must say, Rajeev, that you are an optimist. Some of us are near to forgetting that one of those two words exists. But while saying that, I'm reminded of a mentor of mine, Ashok Desai, the former Attorney General. And I had so many conversations with him. And always he would have a sense of positivity. And once I asked him, I said, Ashok Bhai, how can you be so positive in the face of all these things? And what he told me then has stayed with me very strongly. He said, Sriram, optimism is not an option, it is a duty. And then I realized how much a leading person's optimism means to those around him. But as much as optimism is a duty, I think it is also a duty for those who can to speak out. And to speak out not in circular language, but to speak out in plain speak. To speak out in a way that it reaches, touches, inspires, comforts and strengthens. To create a commonality and a groundswell. I think that is needed in these times. We all talk about, the importance of a candle in the darkness. But, when a candle throws light, you see small flickers of light around. And those are not from the candle. Those are, I think, from people whose lives light up when they see something being said, something being done. Those are flickers waiting to be lit. Some of Rajiv's writings are in the Constitution. I think the Constitution is not only our guide, but it is our public religion. In our houses, we must have our private religions, but we must keep them there. Out, where we are all together, there is, I think, only one public religion. And as long as that Constitution of ours keeps its basic structure intact, never mind what Ranjan Gogoi is saying now, his newly found doubts about the basic structure, I think Ranjan Gogoi has become a national joke. But as long as the Constitution keeps its basic structure, we must keep it as our guide and our public religion. And the court has to be its preserver. And some of us watch in dismay when the court does not play that role. There is a Lakshman Rekha that a court must draw when it protects the Constitution. And the Lakshman Rekha cannot, as I said in a recent article, be a line like in a kabaddi game where you allow the executive to trespass and foray at will. But it also means you must have the right people in the court. And I must tell you that I'm in the midst now of a raging debate on that, because on 2 days back, Fali Nariman, Madan Lokur and I authored a piece asking the collegium why Justice Muridhar is not taken to the court. There is another basic structure, as important as the basic structure of the Constitution, and that is the basic structure of the idea of India. And while we may have discussions on this part or that part of the periphery, that basic structure, the idea of India, is something we must preserve and not dilute. When I say this, I go back to the time of the emergency. 5 judges of the Supreme Court, 4 ruled that a citizen has no rights during an emergency. One man, Justice Khanna, ruled otherwise. He is the originator of the basic structure. I've always thought that we made a huge mistake after the emergency. We should make Khanna the Chief Justice, called him back from retirement, made him the Chief Justice, rather than Chandrachud and Bhagwati, who let us down. As you can see, I'm a little fond of plain speak. Congratulations, Rajeev. But I have one suggestion. You know, I've read a few of the pieces. Sorry, I haven't had time to go through the whole book. But I think that for the depth of your writing, 800 words, 1,000 words isn't enough to really bring it out. I mean, you reach there, you give us the idea, but so I would suggest to you that you might consider switching from the Hindu to the Frontline. Vaishna will be generous. Thank you very much. I wish you all a very good evening, which I'm sure it will be. I'm not too well. In case I have to leave, you must excuse me, but I will stay as long as I can. All the very best.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening where we are going to talk a little bit about Rajeev Bhargava's book. Some lovely words there from Sriram Panchu, who's trying to say things like he's an accidental launcher and trying to, sort of, I don't know, sort of play his role down, but he is one of those voices he speaks of. He is one of those who speak up at a time when it is difficult and it's becoming increasingly difficult to speak up, and his writings and his voice, especially coming from the judiciary, has of course been an inspiration to many of us. So thank you, Sriram, for that lovely talk you just gave. I'm going to quickly, so we're a very small group here, so I thought I'll keep it informal. I'll ask Rajeev questions, and he'll answer, but feel free if you feel that you want to, intervene with the secondary question, or if you want to, take something ahead, feel free to interrupt and let us make it a conversation and not something very formal. But like I said, it will be roughly a question-answer session. I'm going to start with something very, very current, very urgent. You, of course, have been writing this column for the Hindu's main paper Sunday section. He's been writing for many years, I think, 2 to 3 years.
2017 to 2020, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
a couple of articles which I
Yes.
wrote in 2021 and 22.
Yeah.
So.
And the way it's come together in this book, I think, is lovely. It's quite a happy sort of process of putting it. It reads well. You can keep dipping into it, and it all makes sense. So I'm going to ask you something now. Political ethics is something you talk of in your book, and political ethics can be seen from, of course, 2 angles: the ethics of process. What is the process of making a bill, for instance, or what is the process of making appointments and so on. And then there is the idea of the ethics of policy. What are these bills and what is the policy that has been taken? There are 2 kinds of ethics. And I think all of us here will agree that in both of these ethical aspects, there is a deep slide in India, and a slide that admittedly has been coming for a while now, but there's been a dramatic drop in recent times. But at the same time, we are the people who also had a Gandhi, we also had an Nehru and an Ambedkar, who kind of put ethics at the center of everything they did, both in their lives and in their works. So I was wondering, Raj, if you could tell me what it is that has caused this kind of turnaround in a nation. What is it that allows us suddenly to completely ignore the idea of ethics almost as if it is, an inessential today?
And that would take me a very long time. I think the process really started, in my view, globally in the early 70s. Remember the Cultural Revolution of the 60s, when there were all kinds of mini mutinies and a lot of emancipatory movements. Universities were among the most strongly affected by those movements, and then they began to influence the rest of our society. But it was a short-lived movement. But I think it shook the right wing very strongly. Early 70s, there were a number of think tanks which were deliberately created to counter the culture that spawned in the 60s. I'm not saying that everything about it was good. I'm only saying that there was something new and aspirational in those movements, which threatened the existing order. And I think a huge lot of investment was put into these think tanks. Don't forget that the late 70s saw the emergence of Margaret Thatcher in Britain and soon afterwards Ronald Reagan. And I don't think their rise would have been possible without the consolidation of a certain kind of policy in economics, neoliberalism, which is again fostered by these think tanks. And a whole lot of counter movements. I don't think theorists have thought enough about the phenomenon called backlash. I don't think when we theorize, we should take into account inevitably the resistance that will come from those who are threatened, no matter who they are, left, right. And I think the fact is that it is the rich and the powerful who were threatened in the 60s, and they had the money to invest in these think tanks. There was another very important event that took place actually a series of events that took place in 1979. There was a so-called, the revolution in Iran, when Khomeini came to power. Now, I don't know if how many of you remember that in the early period, it was not very clear which way the movement will go. The Soviets had also invested quite a lot in the movement, but there was a right-wing religious movement also in the offing. But we all know that it went the way that it did with Khomeini. It was 1979 was also the time when the famous the Mecca mosque was occupied by militant Islamic groups, and there was a deal which was struck between Saudi royalty and the militants. 79 is also the time when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, so you had the birth of political Islam. It's also the period when the Americans started to come very strong, heavily, soon afterwards, maybe late 79 or early 80, when they started to move into Pakistan and Afghanistan and built up all the madrasas to fight the Soviets. So, a whole lot of changes took place, and we see that as the resurgence of religion. There's actually a change of location of religion. Religion was never dead, it just took a new form, and it came as political Islam. So, I think if you really go back, if you ask me if the explanation and it's been a movement ever since, these two economic, the turn into a more robust, a more brutal, less humanist capitalism on the one side, and the construction of a new enemy and political Islam. I think they have certainly played a very major role in a whole lot of changes that have taken place.
It's interesting, isn't it, that you speak of a resurgence of religion when you answer a question about the decline of ethics or public morality. It seems interesting to me.
So I think this. So I forgot the initial question and got caught up in the explanation that I was giving. I think this robust capitalism is completely egoistic and is built on greed and on selfishness, and there is no place for morality in it. There is not even a place for deeper reflection on evaluation of our own desires. We just want to get whatever it is that we want, and we want to grab it. And I think that tendency has grown and has infiltrated even the traditional middle classes who have, kept themselves away from it. And I think religion itself lost its own ethical moorings. It was, the world, these new religious movements, whether they took the form of Islamic sort of terrorism or ultranationalisms in Sri Lanka or in Burma and certainly in India, they are kind of, collective egoism, forms of collective egoisms. And they want to get whatever it is that they want at any cost. They have no limits. And these limits have been removed gradually, slowly. And what we witness today is shameless, shameless capitalism and shameless ultranationalism. And it's not, certainly I feel that that's what's happening in India, and it's happening elsewhere. So ethics really has no place in this economic and political order.
It's lovely, because that's exactly what I was going to ask you next, which is that, ethics of course comes from the word ethos, and that in Greek discourse, when Aristotle even spoke about it as rhetoric, when ethos appeals to the person's character, pathos appeals to the person's emotions, etc., etc. And then of course ethos also means the general spirit of a time, of an era, of a people. And all of these in some ways is about communing, isn't it, of a certain kind, communing between an individual and a community and society, the sense of an obligation that that an individual has to society and vice versa and so on. But all of this, the idea of ethics is in a way about the other, acknowledging the other.
Right.
And I in fact wanted to ask you that you have been writing a column in ethics for so long at a time when, don't you think the idea of ethics, and I have some young friends here who might, do you think the idea of ethics itself is unfashionable and inexplicable to a generation
Yeah.
which is kind of located itself in a place of so much narcissism and a sort of an unexamined space that it is in, that it locates, it chooses to locate itself in, where it's all about the self, the self's desires, the self's gratifications, and
Yeah.
that above everything else. So how do you even approach the topic of ethics to somebody or to a generation that might not
Right,
be interested
right.
in?
So I think, I'll answer this question in two different ways. One is something which is accompanied this hyper-individualism, which I've talked about in the last 40 years. And in this hyper-individualistic age, morality is nothing but, individual preferences, right?
Yeah.
So one of the first things that, and this has been happening for the last 30 years in my classroom when I've stopped teaching for quite some time now, but when I taught, one of the things that people kept asking me was, but sir, you have your morality, I have my morality, and I kept thinking that, look, there is an intersubjective, morality has to be intersubjective. As you said, you use the word ethics, but it has to be about the other. In fact, morality is about the interpersonal domain. It specifically refers to what your conduct in relation to others. And that is something which is not based on individual preferences. It's something that is something that we come to agree upon. It is not fixed, it's not unrevisable, it is contextual, it changes from place to place, but nonetheless, it is pretty stable.
Yes.
And it has a common foundation, no matter how small that foundation, that common community is. But the general sort of ethos, in the sense in which you use the term, is one where people think that morality is just, it's what I feel, it's emotivism, it's moral preferentialism, and it's moral subjectivism. And so this is something which is very hard to fight. And the moment you think of morality as something which is grounded in individual preferences, then it's your preferences versus my preferences, then anything goes, and there is no way that you can rationally arbitrate. So the place of reason itself, in the best sense of the word, right? Reason can be used in so many different senses. In the best sense of the term, the place of reason is dislodged from where it traditionally belonged. So reason is no role now. Reason is to tell us, and we'll come to that, brings me to the second. Reason is to tell us what the good is. But if the good is nothing but what I want and what you want, then there is no place for that. The connection between good and reason is broken, right? And so there is no rational arbitration. There's no conversation possible. To say that morality is subjective is a conversation stopper. And I think that is one. And the second way that I want to answer a question is that everybody knows that we are creatures of desire, but what people forget is that we are also creatures who evaluate our desires and make a distinction between which desire is worthy and which desire is not worthy. Which desire, among all the worthy desires, is of greater worth, and which is not which doesn't have that worth. We also have conceptions of the ultimate good, not just what we find worthy, but what is the ultimate. And that is precisely the domain of ethics, the distinction between good and bad. And all ethical reasoning will tell you that you have to prevent the immediate gratification of your desire. And not only that, you have to modify your desires in order to achieve the higher good. there's another element of ethics which relates to the second point about morality, that it's no matter how worthy your desire is, and no matter how committed you are to the good, if it really disturbs, I mean that's a very mild term, it violates somebody else's pursuit of his or her good life, then you have to curtail your desire. And that's what morality teaches us. Don't do certain things.
That's the social contract as
That's,
well.
well, that, I don't like the language of,
Yeah.
but I get what you mean.
That's unwritten.
Yeah, it's an unwritten moral rule,
Code.
the code, that there are certain things that you will not do even if it helps you to satisfy your ultimate good. I mean, you can't kill someone or exploit or oppress. And that is what was immensely wrong about colonialism. You can argue that the British Empire did, I mean, arguably, it did some good to the British people. But at what cost? By oppressing not only people at the subcontinent, but people all over the world. I mean, what immense damage it caused. So the moral cost of colonialism was so heavy. And of course, Gandhi was one of the pioneers in that kind of an argument. So I think both ethics in the sense of morality, which has to do with right and wrong, restraining your desires to avoid doing harm to others, but also ethics in the sense of good and bad, restraining your desires now so that you can pursue something much more worthy in now and achieve it in the future. In both these senses, we are creatures, who not only have desires but also we strongly evaluating these desires. And this function of strong evaluation is something which is not completely, but which we're losing all the time. And no wonder we are in the state we are. And as I said, this individual and communal egoism which is ruling the world today, and I see nationalism of certain kinds as forms of communal egoism and individual egoism, which is something which is really pushed by a certain kind of global capitalism. I think both of these are responsible for the mess we are in and for the impoverishment of our ethical and moral life.
And this sort of, what you spoke of, this sort of untrammeled pursuit of individual desire, you speak in your book quite brilliantly, I thought, of a moral vacuum in India today, where in the public sphere, nobody's willing to take a stand, where the public sphere is absolutely empty of value judgments, where people are not willing to say that categorically state that something is good or bad, but are willing to say that good or bad depends on how it affects me. What is it? So something that's good for you might be bad for me and vice versa. So they are making it, there are no absolute stands which are meeting, and you call it a moral vacuum. I was more interested in asking you, where do you think this comes from? Does it come from our history? Does it come from religious texts? Does it come from the idea of dharma, where you had to pursue your duty or your task regardless of how it was pursued? So where do you think this is coming from in India? This inability to take a stand.
Oh, well,
or refusal.
certainly not from religion.
Okay.
I mean, I think you can find a lot of fault in, say, Varnashram Dharma,
Yeah.
because it was very jati specific,
Yeah.
caste specific. But nonetheless, people took a stand,
Mm-hmm.
right? They may have taken a wrong stand, but they took a stand. I mean, Dharma was about the right, and we wouldn't consider what was right for them
But yeah.
as the right, but we certainly can't say that they
In
had,
that context it was.
that there was no, they knew the distinction between right and wrong. So I think traditional religions, I wouldn't say, had that problem, but I think there is, however, I mean, two the forms that religion have taken, where you begin to get disturbed, morally speaking. One is a tradition which is part of the doctrine of some of the Abrahamic traditions, where adherence to your own moral or ethical doctrine comes with an enemy to be fought. So the distinction between friend and enemy is something which is internal, and the external enemy is as much of a problem as an internal enemy. Now thank God that people don't live by that doctrine, but it's a resource which is there. But that resource is no longer restricted to Abrahamic religions. I can think at least of 3 ways in which that has been. Of course, as I said, most people, for most of the time, haven't lived by those doctrines. Lived Islam is very different, lived Christianity is different. So, but apart from that, it's been secularized. Soviet Stalinism was not, coming from, not appealing to any of these Abrahamic traditions, but it certainly had this whole idea of absolute truth, and those who don't believe in absolute truth are people who are to be expunged, eliminated, thrown out. That's one. The second, I think, is a certain kind of scientism. I thank God the logical positivists who claim that the only thing which exists is what can be verified empirically, and the rest of it is meaningless. Not only false, but meaningless. Made science, all poetry, everything, religion, music, everything senseless and meaningless. They had come to power, and there were a lot of people in the Vienna Circle who were pretty serious about it, but fortunately. But that scientism is also, I feel, a very pernicious idea, because it doesn't have anything, human meaning, human understanding is completely missing from it. It's just the only truth is what can be established empirically by science. And the third is ultranationalism. It has created new forms of exclusions. You are a true Hindu, all other Hindus are false. You're the only true nationalist, all other nationalists are false. And those who are false have to be excluded, they have no place, there must be. So there's no room for interpretation, for divergences of interpretation, and this is not. Religious nationalism is only one particular form of this, but ultranationalism of all kinds. It can be linguistic, it can be based on other criteria. But all these are, I think, are very, very deeply problematic and full of hatred and violence. And
Rajeev, if I might interrupt you briefly, in your response, you speak of the enemy, the creation of the enemy, and you also speak of the exclusions, all of which speak to my relationship with the external world, right? But there is also an inner dialogue that is going on, which you see increasingly in the public sphere. For example, when Amit Shah does something particularly crafty but completely unethical, it is hailed as, look, this is such a Chanakya has come, to our political sphere. And there is great admiration in this, right? But that admiration completely ignores the ethics of the move. I won't go into morals, I'll just say ethics of whatever it is that he has done or said. And he too is very comfortable. For instance, calling a refugee a parasite, a demak, This is not a conversation, or this is not a language that we heard in the public sphere, but we have become very comfortable very easily. And that is where I was wondering, what explains the psyche of the Indian that allowed us so quickly to become comfortable with this? Is there something in our past that we should look to, or is this just an evolving problem?
I think the warrior ethic no matter where it has, been dominant, has a tendency of that kind. You conquer territories, you're brutal, you're violent, you exterminate the other, you must grab something, whatever comes your way. If there's anybody who prevents you from having it, then you eliminate it. Now that warrior ethic, it's full of machismo,
Yes.
right? It's very toxic masculinity. I've written about that.
Yes.
And it's funny that in the 3rd century before the Common Era, we had the greatest figure the world has ever known, who wrote and who spoke against the warrior culture. He was not against royalty. I mean, he was an emperor himself, Ashoka. But he spoke about changing the ethic completely by attacking this warrior ethic, and by disassociating himself with it, and by launching a new ethic. I mean, some of the greatest anti-war statements are to be found in the Ashokan inscriptions. And I mean, it was not just against the conquest of territories, but even the attack on hunting. Because I mean, every living species is got deep value and deep worth, and his passages on how he's abandoned hunting, and all his hunting yatras are now to be replaced by what he called dhammic yatras, which is of course a very political notion. It's got nothing to do with religion. Ashoka is not in his inscriptions, he is not a Buddhist. There's no mention of nirvana, there's no mention of karma. There are a couple of inscriptions which are about the Buddha, but are completely separate from the rest of his anthology of inscriptions. I think so you find that immensely inspiring, but unfortunately, his own land disowned him. I mean, he's survived in the attempt to forget him and to erase him, but not explicitly.
Yeah.
But I find it very, very fascinating that Ashoka keeps re-emerging. I find him in Akbar, the latter Akbar, and I find him also in modern times in Gandhi and Nehru. The figure of Ashoka implicitly in Gandhi, the way he deals with religious pluralism, but much more especially in Nehru as a major figure of interest. And I think so. I consider the Ashokan attempt to create a political, a politically I wouldn't call it politically endorsed, but a subtle nudge that the emperor gives in order to sustain religious pluralism. I mean, the legacy of that is found throughout the Indian history, where most kings have given political patronage to all religious groups.
So you believe that that there has always been in this region that's connected by certain religions, certain culture, and so on, culture. But this people, do you think that they always had a moral imaginary, that
there was a pluralist imaginary, and there was an imaginary of implicit, something.
Not an invention of our founding fathers.
No, I don't believe that. I don't think that this can be invented by a few people at a certain point of time in history. I mean, there is a history to it.
And you don't believe that this, what you call pluralism, existed alongside deeply violent nature as well?
Of course, I mean, there is a huge amount of political violence. There is, ritual violence. There is caste-related violence.
Exactly.
There is domestic violence. There is violence against women. I mean, all that violence is there. So my argument is not that India is free of violence. Our argument is only that a particular kind of religious violence, which is based on hatred, it's, or ideological violence, that was not there until the late 18th, 19th century. And it emerged then, and it has consolidated itself now, and we're seeing, the fulsome expression of that in the 21st century. I mean, in Europe, confessional states emerged in the 17th century. None of that happened in India until the 21st century, when now there is an attempt to have a confessional state. We're following an outdated European idea, which the Europeans have tried to reject. It's difficult to reject. It's part of their history. They still are battling with it, and we see a whole lot of right-wing movements, which are also in Europe, and they will certainly learn from that very disturbing history. But we have not had that history, and we are going through it for no reason. I mean, I'm sure if we were to really go through it, 200 years from now we'll start another movement against it. But why go through that? I mean, we don't have to imitate that Western modernization project.
And I will come to that in a while, but before that I want to ask you something else. You speak in your book of the continuities and discontinuities with the past that we as a people are experiencing. And so you have pacifism from Ashoka, of course, but you also have the very hyper-masculine Vedic ethos. And you also have the brilliantly non-denominational shlokas of, say, the Asia Upanishads. But then you also have, the Varnas from the Dharma Shastra, right? And then you have the modern age where the average Indian is also sort of passionately embracing modernity, right? Whether it's in technology, in artificial intelligence, artificial insemination, or there is the whole idea of social mores, divorce and dating and pornography, for instance. And then there are changing cultural fashions, what you wear, what you eat, and so on. So it seems to me as if the average Indian today is kind of dealing simultaneously and almost like psychedelically with a whole lot of things, the past, the present, the violently modern, all of this. And I wanted to ask you if you believe that at some point in this engagement with the past and the present and the future, we as a people have suffered a kind of psychotic break which has impacted us. I feel as if there's been a certain kind of a break, in the national psyche that is that is displaying itself in some of the things that we witness today, some of the actions, some of the acts that we witness today. So,
I mean, that's a very difficult question. I don't think I can answer that question offhand. First of all, it's very hard to know what was going on in the past, certainly in the lives of ordinary people. Most of the texts that we have are written by literate people, and most of the texts in Sanskrit are by Brahmins. So, and they were more interested in, Dharam Shastra, for example, is not a representative text, and it's not a descriptive text, it's a normative text written by Brahmins for Brahmins. Now, how much can you find out from that, about how society was like at that time, how ordinary people lived, and so on. So, and most of the texts are like that. And that is,
is it a conflict between a certain kind of, what's the word that I would like to use, tradition versus modernity?
Much of what we call tradition is probably, it's 100 years old. It's hard to tell. Yet we can access the past. It's not that we can't. It's a little one-sided because it comes from only certain sources. But there's enough to read between the lines and to get to know, but that needs a systematic study of several million people doing this very important work to find out our past and to construct a past. It won't be completely objective, it won't be the true past, but it will have some degree of plausibility. At the moment, there are only we have some good histories, but I don't think it's very convincing. We hardly read any texts. So we don't know the language. Most of us don't understand Prakrit or Pali or Persian or Sanskrit, and that is one of the major failures of Indian education, that we haven't really. And so we depend on others.
Others' interpretation.
Well, yeah. But the point that I was making was that there is no way that we can compare, what the social life, how does social life today compare with. Pornography you mentioned, I don't know whether it was, what kind of pornography used to exist in the past. There may be, I can't imagine.
Mostly access is.
Maybe, it's those are very different, the medium is different, the extent would be different, and a whole lot of other things that you mentioned. So it's hard for me to answer that question, honestly. I won't be able to say anything.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It was framed more as a set of, things that one puzzles with to understand a certain degree of violence.
But you also mentioned a break.
A break,
There is even colonialism, it introduced an epistemic break in some sections, but it wasn't anything like what happened in Africa or in Latin America, where to the native Indians or to the Aborigines in Australia and New Zealand and so on. We've had dislocations, and we've had things that were at the center in our ethos at one time. They were marginalized, and things were at the margins were brought to the center by colonialism. But it was not a break of the kind that others' cultures have experienced. With people like Fanon and Césaire and all these people have written about. I don't think we've had that problem. But a severe dislocation, yes, among the elites. But again, that didn't happen to ordinary people. And it's happening now. The ordinary people are changing in the last 50, 70 years. For these, again, I would blame a certain kind of capitalism, a certain kind of nationalism with the new media. That's changing. But 50 years from now, I don't think the ordinary people suffered from that kind of break. And I think that's what I think Gandhi found out and discovered and used that potential. Because, let's put it this way, and I think I've written this also, that those who are not affected by fame, power, or wealth have a much better chance of being ethical. And ordinary people are not affected by any of these external goods. And they have their traditional ethics and morality, and it may be very anti-modern and may not be, but there was a certain sincerity about it. I'm talking not about the elites even in the past, I'm talking just about the ordinary folks, as I said, who were uncorrupted by power or by prestige. And I think Gandhi had that faith in those people, and I'm afraid I don't know whether we can have faith in that anymore, because the people are very different today. They are no longer 70 years changed a lot. The medium has the social media itself, is availability, the line that was there between the rural and the urban, that has completely broken down. The worst of the rural has entered the urban, the worst of the urban has entered the rural. I think today, I'm not an ethnographer, but my feeling is that there isn't really much to choose between a certain kind of middle class in the urban areas and the same kind of class in the rural areas. So I think in that sense we are living through a very abysmal time. There is very little. In that sense, I think of what Sriram said. I think the optimism is a little. I wouldn't say it's fake, but it's really. I think you got to really, try very hard to sustain it, and yet, I mean, there isn't. You have to be hopeful.
You also in one, I think in one of your pieces you also speak of Merlin Donald and his classification of the mimetic, the mythic and the theoretic, and you go on to say that it would be foolish to dismiss myth and only focus on theory, because of course myth is all around us, and it's an inevitable part of our lives, and I completely agree with you. But do you not also think that given exactly the kinds of ignorances and the kinds of aspirations and the kinds of looking back that we are in the middle of today, how do you then inculcate a willingness or an ability to distinguish between the mythical and reality, or between myth and history? How do you do that in a nation at this stage?
Well, first just for everybody and just to clarify to myself the distinction between these three. I think what Donald and others have argued is that we have three cultural or cognitive capacities by which we understand the world and ourselves and other people. And the oldest, of course, is mimetic. I mean, it's directly embodied in our bodies, in our gestures. It's expressive, and it's stored in our skills. And you learn it by repetition, and I mean, it's evident to me that it is so fundamental even in modern life that we just cannot do without it. I mean, I can't even speak if I didn't use my hands, and if I wouldn't be able to communicate to friends or to people without my expressive gestures. Not to speak of dance, and I can't imagine cricket being played without a lot of repetitive, stroke making every time. You must have seen when a good cricketer always, plays a shot, he follows it up with an imitation. So I think it's not over that capacity, that this was the first great capacity that humans developed, but the second is dependent on language. So mythic is one word in the traditional sense, but you can also talk about narrative. It's all, folk tales, storytelling, and with those, a whole lot of questions emerged about the origin of the universe, about the place of humans. So you had these great narrative texts, and it's only in the last 3,000 to 5,000 years that we've had this independent capacity of what we call reason and theorizing, when we stand apart from the world and we disembed ourselves, and through what we believe to be a disembodied capacity of abstract reasoning, we try to find out the truth. And this is something which only a few people do, and it's fantastic that they do that. But most of us, even these great theorists and scientists, live by theory only for a few minutes maybe a few hours, but I mean, in their whole life, I think it's only 1/100th of the time that they do that. The rest of the time is all narrative and mythic. And in secular rationalists better understand that. And those who don't believe in theory must understand, or reason, rational capacity, must understand the usefulness of it, because it's made, so much. It has had its negative impact, as many of us know, but it's also given us a great deal of positive things. So the idea that there was a stadial consciousness, right, that you have the mimetic, which will be superseded by the mythic, and then the mythic will be superseded by the theoretic, and we will live by theory alone, and this is going to be, the truth will be accessed only by theory. I'm saying that is a ridiculous idea, and I don't think anybody should believe in that. So we should look for mythic and mimetic elements within our life. But having said that, I think currently all of us will benefit a lot from a little bit of theoretic reasoning, evidence-based science, and so I think we're severely undermining that capacity currently, and I would very much like more emphasis to be played in our formal education, at least, without undermining that other thing.
You seemed to indicate, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that perhaps our public intellectuals were rejecting myth too much or completely, and which possibly could have led to a certain kind of
I mean, I really can't say whether that is what is led. I think it's a very small part of the story, but nonetheless, it was wrong to have done that.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what impact it had, and how much responsibility these people have to take for what is happening today. That I'm not sure of. But I think to have rejected modes of ordinary human understandings, which are not only in all the elites, but also certainly the dominant mode by which people understand the world, who are not formally trained to become, doctors and engineers and architects and astronomers and social scientists. I think they certainly don't have any of that. So there has to be mutual appreciation, and the high kind of pedestal on which we put ourselves is mistaken. I think that's what is wrong. How much it's contributed to the present mess, I have no way to tell. That's a solid, a research topic for someone to.
But of course, what you say, that the idea of mutual appreciation is I think, dead today, and that's created the deep divisiveness that we are facing today. But I don't think we have too much time, and I would like questions from the audience. So one last question for you, which is sort of something which Sriram Panchu also spoke of. In one place you say, and I quote, "I can't but reach the reassuring conclusion that humanitarian ethics, a compassionate response to people suffering, is alive and kicking among ordinary Indians despite the violence and hate-mongering." Unquote. So Rajeev, after Manipur and that horrific video of the women being paraded, the RPF Jawan shooting people down in cold blood, would you still make this comment?
I mean, I was moved to make that comment when I saw Sikhs offering the Gurdwaras to Muslims who were prevented from praying in the Maidans. I was also very moved by the Sikhs going to the border and offering food to Rohingya Muslims who had fled from Myanmar. And of course, there are all sorts of stories even during COVID. It wasn't, the government's record on what they did with migrant workers is awful, but I think there are lots of people who tried to help on the way. Manipur is a different story. I really have no inkling of what people. We've only heard the stories of violence and all the terrible atrocities that took place in Manipur. But what ordinary people did to help each other, those stories are not known to us. If it didn't happen, then I have to change my mind, and not totally, but at least to some extent. But if it did happen, then that confirms what I said. That I really do have faith still, despite all the reservations that I meant. I think it's been this new. It's a storm.
Yeah.
It's a storm. It's a furious storm of immorality and the disconnection between language and truth. My God, language used to lie, to deceive, dissimulation. It's upfront. I mean, there's no. I never thought that this
The truth is
language is always used for all kinds of things, but to do it in such a shameless manner and to do it, by eminent leaders of the country.
Yeah.
That's something which is shocking. So I think, shamelessness today is something, I think it was a Turkish writer, I can't remember, it's a very difficult name, Tamil Kuran, M.E.S.A. But she said something to the effect that immorality is hot these days, and people make outrageous statements, and they make them shamelessly. They do shameless. Tell me one thing. This is actually I was moved to write the book after 4 or 5 incidents that took place in 2016. One of them was that rape of a child in Jammu.
That's right.
There was I met some people from my own class, and by class I mean not only Varga, but also my schoolmates in Lodi Gardens walking, and there was not a word from them. They were completely callous about it. Similarly about akhlaq and about so many. The one image that I can't ever forget is that police officer. The body of that police officer, half inside the jeep and half outside the jeep, who was killed by a mob that lynched him for doing the right thing. He was trying to be impartial. He was trying to prevent communal enmity on the streets, and he was killed by a crowd. And there was a reason for that. They did not want impartial behavior from the police. They wanted to teach a lesson to any police officer who goes against them. So this is a classic move. The referee has to be first taught a lesson that you have been biased always, and then you have to make him biased towards yourself, and then you make that whole machinery, that biased machinery, as a weapon against the so-called enemies, and you destroy the whole order. That is something which really shook me, and I thought that, and also the utter ignorance and the indifference of people around me, my class, people, they just didn't, they don't know anything about the basics of.
That is the silence we spoke of.
But it's not just a silent illiteracy about the Constitution. A lot of people, people, they're not my friends, but certain people, they don't know that they think that Muslims have reservations in India. That minority rights includes reservation of Muslims in government jobs. That is the state of our understanding of the Constitution and of our society. So,
It's rather depressing.
And this is educated middle class people. I'm afraid there was a Supreme Court lawyer who was among them. I should have told Dr. Panchu. I was shocked. The ABC of the Constitution is not known. People don't know that minority rights there is one provision in the Constitution which is very specifically about rights to religious minorities, and that has to do with education institutions, the setting up of maintenance of education institutions. The rest is all, there's no other right. There is no political right, there is no other economic right, there is no job reservation, nothing. So, and we know about what the structure report has said about the state of Muslims in this country.
It's It's not
And
just
yet
active.
we keep going on and on and on and about appeasement and
It's not just
strange.
it's not just ignorance. It's not just ignorance, isn't it? It's also an active campaign of misinformation that has been launched over the last couple of decades. But on that note, we are running out of time, so depressing. But I will go back to how we started, saying that optimism is not really a choice. I think we have to be optimistic. There's really no other way out. If anybody has questions, please. I see a hand there.
Good evening. A couple of doubts. You're talking about ethics. For a terrorist in his own country, he is a patriot. For the opposite country, he is a terrorist. For his country, he is a patriot. And with a lot of respect to Gandhi, since Gandhi and Godse movie, he was objecting the young boys and young girls not to get married, and he was married. I don't know what is the ethics. And Modi, when he introduced, he wanted to bring CAA, he was telling something like, I'm doing some historical justice. We don't know what kind of historical justice he was doing. And he said, these things are, most of the Vedas are written from Brahmins to Brahmins, but I don't think Manodharma Shastri was written for Brahmins. I've read about 50 pages from that I'm talking about it. Even Garuda Purana, Hitler will feel ashamed, to see Hitler. Even Hitler will not have such kind of punishments. Garuda Purana has such kind of punishment. So where is the ethics of all these people?
You raised a number of questions. I'll just have two quick, I'll respond to two quick aspects of your complex question. One is that when I said that Dharma Shastras are written by the Brahmins for the Brahmins, I didn't mean, it's a vision of a society, which is a Brahminical vision, which is to be propagated by Brahmins, right? So it's not that it's confined only to Brahmins. There's not Brahmins writing for Brahmins, meaning, you must, it's not Brahmin specific, it relates of course to a whole lot of the rest of society, but it's basically what Brahmins must do as Brahmins in that society, right? So that was a slight misunderstanding, I think. On terrorism, I think the fundamental thing about terrorism is that you kill unarmed, innocent civilians in order to propagate your viewpoint. I think if that element is missing, then you're using violence, but it's not terrorism. So I don't know, I can't remember in what context you use. You said patriot for one person. No, but I think, look, Bhagat Singh is often called by some people a terrorist, but Bhagat Singh never killed any innocent people to propagate any viewpoint. He actually shot dead a British officer. That's not terrorism. That's a violent act, I agree. It's something that Gandhi wouldn't approve. But it's not a terrorist act. Terrorism is a certain, the creation of a certain spectacle to make, to advertise your viewpoint by killing not just your targeted enemy, but anybody, to create a sensation. That's for me what terrorism essentially is all about. And you can see that these are two very different things. So I don't quite I don't think a patriot would ever do that, kill innocent people of his own view. I mean, I don't think so.
No, in his country he is called patriot.
In which country?
His country.
Each country? Well,
His country.
in this country?
No, he's a terrorist.
Ah.
In this country.
Okay. Yeah.
Anybody else? There at the back.
Sir, I need to have more clarity on the secularism. Sir, secularism is like, should not interfere with educational institution or schools, government like that. Or that the secularism is, just a minute, sir. Indian secularism is about mediating between different communities. Which one is correct, sir?
Sorry?
Indian secularism is about mediating between different communities.
Mediating. Yeah. And the first statement was that it is not supposed to interfere. Secularism is that what you say?
Why don't you just give us
So-
a little talk about
No,
how
so
it approaches
educational institutions, the state, unlike in the United States, where there is a very strict separation of church and state, in India we do not have such a wall of separation from the very beginning. We have what I've called principal distance. The two are distant from each other, but it doesn't mean that one cannot interfere in the other or one cannot intervene in the matters of the other. And take, for example, the constitutional article that I mentioned just a while ago pertaining to educational institutions. Now, the Christian community can set up its own schools, and it is a fundamental right of the Christian community to set up their own schools where they can teach not only secular education but also in part some kind of religious education, and there can also be some religious instruction. Every Christian school has a little chapel, a college has a chapel, and so on, for people who are Christians to go and worship there. But if that school or college, if that educational institution takes even 1 rupee from the government, then it cannot discriminate in the admissions between Christians and other non-Christians. So there has to be the principle of non-discrimination is followed. And if that wasn't the case, then you will find all convents with only Christians, and not, which is absolutely not true. You know that there are all kinds of people from all faiths are part of colleges run by Christian missions and schools run by. And that's because they used to do it even earlier, but even after the introduction of the Constitution itself has a sub-article within the article that this policy of non-discrimination has to be followed if any public funding. Not only that, nobody can be compelled to go to the chapel, right? So if a Hindu were to go to say St. Stephen's College or to a school run by a Christian mission, then people who are not Christians cannot be compelled to go and for any kind of religious instruction. They can reject that idea, and that's certainly something which is constitutionally valid. And this is all in the Constitution. The Constitution mentions that. These are sub-articles within the article. I think it's 26 or 30, I can't remember offhand. But one of these two articles. So, the principles of equality and freedom, those are extremely important, and all kinds of ways have been devised by which to ensure that these values are protected and somehow they are sustained as reasonably as possible. So even when religious communities set up their own educational institutions, provided they take even one single paisa from the government, they have to adopt these, they have to follow these principles of equality and freedom and non-discrimination. So, what was the question? Sorry.
Sir, actually, in India,
Yeah.
secularism treating very differently, sir. Like, the seculars and liberals,
Yeah.
if a Hindu follows customs or rituals, no, seculars and liberals will come and tell, no, you should follow that one. You have to be very secular like that, actually. But it's not applying for other religions.
No, that's a terrible tragedy for other religions. That the state has not interfered with them. I mean, I would put it the other way. I think the Hindus have been pampered by Indian secularism. Because all the changes that have taken place at the initiative of the state for the good, right? Those changes have come about within Hinduism. Whereas all the other religious communities, they've had to initiate changes on their own, and those who've done it have benefited, and those who haven't have not benefited. Then the people who suffer, say from the lack of reforms within Muslim personal law, right, which is what you may have in mind, those who have benefited, it has nothing to do with Hindus, right? It is to do with the sufferers are Muslim women, right? It's within members of their own community who suffer at the hands of patriarchal Muslims. So it's something we ought to be sympathizing with the Muslim women. And they've been let off in some ways, and of course reform is necessary within Muslim personal law, certainly. And much more reform is necessary within Hindu personal law. Don't forget that it's an unfinished task. All kinds of changes have still to take place within these personal laws. They are still very gender biased. Even Hindu personal law is gender biased. So I'm all for a reform of personal laws. The only question is whether it is to take place by force or by some kind of community involvement, by changing their mindset and by getting them to agree to do these things. And I think I have no hesitation in saying that whenever within the Muslims in particular, some reform movements were built, something happened, and I think I blame the governments of the day for that. Something happened, and the reforms took a backseat. I mean, I don't know if you remember the Hamid Dalwai's Satyashodak Samaj in the late 60s, when a lot of changes were to take place in Muslim personal law, but unfortunately, either he died or something happened. Basically the reforms never took off. And there is no denying that the Muslim orthodoxy of a certain kind has been pampered by all kinds of governments. There's no denying that, but we have to honestly admit to that. And that has been a great violation of what we call Indian secularism, and been done by various governments. Reform that could have been initiated earlier are still to take off. But the involvement of the community is extremely important. You cannot force it down anybody's throat. It was because, the Hindu Reform Bill was passed because the large majority in the parliament happened to be Hindus. The Hindus themselves did it, right? So we need more consent and more kind of education among other communities before we can undertake these reforms. You can't force them down the throat. and Muslim women and have to take a leading role in that, and we all have to support that. I mean, most of the secularists that I know in the 90s were formed for a uniform civil code. For God's sake, they fought for a uniform civil code because they felt secure that this is not going to turn into some kind of inter-religious domination. After that, every time you try and introduce a change, a so-called reform in Muslim personal laws, there is a fear that this is going to be another instance of majoritarianism, and that is unfortunately the fear of that has led us to keep sidestepping the issue. But there is no. I don't think there are any two views on the necessity of gender-based reforms in all religious communities. We were very fortunate that in the 50s such a reform could take place among sections of the Hindus, and then through legal battles fought by people such as Mary Roy in Kerala. I mean, some reforms taking place within Christians, and look at the Shabano case is a very good instance of a woman who tried to begin an internal reform, and that was the darkest moment of the Congress Party, right? I mean, that was one of the biggest failures, and I think that began the downfall of a certain kind of secularism. It began with that. It was not secularism. It was something very. It was. I have no hesitation in saying that it was an appeasement of a very small, tiny section of male mullahs. I mean, what the hell? It was wrong. They should have done. They should never have done that. So.
Sir, my last question, like the constitution-based religion, sir, in the constitution, ethics, moral, philosophy, governance are there. Still, the religion have the capacity to play a big role, sir.
Religion.
Yeah. The constitution-based religion.
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
Constitution
So,
says
constitution-based religion, sir. Still, in the constitution, ethics, moral, philosophy, governance are there. Okay. Still, we need religion have the capacity to play a big role than constitution, sir.
Does religion have a bigger
I'm-
role to play despite the constitution not mentioning as a big role?
I've revised my view on religion so many times. I don't know how to answer the question, but I think currently my view is that modern religion is really destroyed Indian ethos, and I think we should all reflect on modern religion. It's quite pernicious. Our Gandhi is the only person, as far as I know, who understood that. His writings on religious pluralism are some of the finest. Modern religion is communal. Already, it's ingrained, and I think all religions are like that. And I call that I used to think that we could make a distinction between religion on one hand and what I call intra and inter-religious domination on the other. And I was for religion but against these forms of domination. But I think the distinction between them is very hard to draw. Modern religion is intrinsically for inter and intra-religious domination. And so ancient forms of religiosities are a different thing altogether. So I very much encourage those religiosities, but modern religion as a category is communal, is all that we find very pernicious. And of course we use the term religion in all kinds of ways, and so I'm not saying that when a lot of people talk about religion, they're really talking about something which is much more to do with our ancient ethos, and that I very much appreciate. I like that. I mean, but we need to think harder about this issue.
One last question here, perhaps?
Yeah, just to change the tone of this, the Q&A that happened. First of all, to thank you and congratulate you, both of you, for absolutely brilliant conversation, which was very enriching and opened out a lot of space. I just want to bring in another factor here related to the book you have written, Rajeev, and the title, one word in the title, despair. And from what I've read of your articles and the compilation, despair arises because of a feeling of a failure of the nation state that is being enacted in front of our eyes. And it's visceral, and it's palpable, and it's visible, and it affects all of us in all kinds of ways. And solutions are not all that evident, etc., etc. So that's one aspect. But I see central to your argument a certain kind of a need to rebuild the nation project. And you keep on, I think, in many essays coming to that, how does one rescue this nation? I'd also like to connect it with what Sriram Panchu said. Another basic structure is the idea of India. Now, for me, there is a little conflict here between the idea of ethics and the idea of the nation. In nation project cannot but be an unethical project in a peculiar way. If you take the last 150 years of nation building history, it has always been at the expense of somebody somewhere. It's always been coercive. At the core there is a virtue. At the core there is this righteousness, equality for all, liberty for all. Those virtues are there. But in the name of those virtues, a certain hammering down happens of many aspects. Let's take the Indian Nation Project. To use a phrase you used just now, Indian nation is still a work in progress.
Yeah.
There has not been a moment from 1947 till today when at least 30% of what we call India wants to be out of India. You can name them: Kashmir, Manipur, Nagaland, Khalistan, Dravidstan, it goes on like that. But there is this entire idea that the idea of India is unimpeachable, is undeniable. You cannot, it's a basic structure. Now, just for the sake of argument, supposing whoever we are, I'm saying we in a very metaphorical sense, but whoever we consider we are, say, okay, India can be India without Kashmir, India can be India without Manipur, India can be India without a Sikh country, India can be India without a Tamil country, Tamil region. Are the heavens going to fall?
Yeah.
Will India still not be a great India with great religion, the great whatever we want to include?
Yeah. Right.
But we have gone to such an extent of moral degradation in what we have done in Kashmir to begin with.
Yeah.
The project India has already failed. We are not. It's impossible to recover it. Impossible. So for me, the title of the book should have been Between Despair and Despair. And I'm saying,
Why should I write a book like that? I'll despair privately. Why should I write
No, no,
convince everybody.
I'm just saying it jokingly, but
I know, but I will not, I won't express my despair in public.
yeah,
I will
agreed.
have to.
But then I think we'll be therefore very careful about expressing in hope also in public in this manner,
Yeah, yeah.
because do we have a solution for a huge community and people in land called Kashmir?
Yeah.
How do we reconcile with 800,000 army men there who are just running the show and doing all, and not a single piece of news comes to us.
Yeah.
Today it is a complete blackout. Every day people are being, houses are being raided and people are being put. Does the rest of India speak? No. I'm sitting in Chennai. Do I speak about Kashmir? Oh, it's somewhere, some corner. Does anybody from Bengal speak? No. So that silence is a silence of the last 70 years.
Yeah. Yeah. But
And
okay.
we are going to pay a price for it. So I think
So-
we need to formulate this idea
So-
of ethics a little outside the perimeter of the nation. That's
Right. So first of all, thanks to everybody for all your questions, and thanks for that. I think the ethnic nation form is very problematic. That's the European nation form. And it has been the dominant form. And it's the form which has never left us and which keeps creeping back. And it was there in the Congress Party. It was there outside the Congress Party. It's affected by people outside the Congress Party, some sections outside that party. And both on, if we're talking about two religious communities, then the Muslims and the Hindus both. So I'm completely in agreement with you that we must not have any truck with the ethnic nation form. And it is the worst idea, the most pernicious idea that has come from Europe that we've accepted. The other worst idea that has come from Europe is religion, which we must also reject. And what we are seeing is a fantastic combination of religion and nation, which are two fundamentally, forms of the worst of Europe. Has given us a lot of good things. I don't want to decry all of Europe and all of Western civilization, unlike Gandhiji, who in Swaraj did that, but I think polemically, because his actions were very often very different from what he said in that fantastic polemical tract. But I think there is something, there is an alternative form of the national. I wish there was another term for it, but the terms are not of our choosing. The terms are historically given, and we just adapt to them unless we are very powerful and we create a new term and everybody starts to use them as part of their basic vocabulary and so on. We've stuck with it. It's a legacy of the anti-colonial movement, which we're very happy to call the national movement. So, but the conception of nation is very different. So it was not an ethnic nation. It was not an all-inclusive nation. There were limits to it, and I completely agree with you that it wasn't. It created its exclusions. Every form of boundary making is going to create some exclusion, and we've got to figure out the ethics of that. And we have to be alert about the negative consequences of any boundary making, including the national boundary. So I mean, completely in sympathy and in spirit with some of the things that you're saying. However, I really don't think collectively we've imagined something different yet. I mean, we've all conformed to the basic split is between the ethnic national form and a non-ethnic national form. Sometimes it's called the civic, but it doesn't quite capture, fully what you and I have in mind. My feeling is that you break up a nation and you'll have a much worse smaller nation, right? I mean, you haven't really got rid of the nation form. You break up, you let India break up, like you were talking about 30% don't believe in India. You let it break up and you get another Pakistan, right? Or you get another something. So, which is much worse than at least what India was for 70 years. Look at Sri Lanka. I mean, so what is this fragmentation going to achieve? You know, this is a process of modernity, and nations have come with that. And unless we reverse the tide of modernization, you will not you will not get rid of the nation form, but you will be better. That's my view. If you let, yes, Kashmir, you know, we made very many mistakes in Kashmir. We all know that. This is one of the biggest, it's our Achilles heel. But it's not only that. I mean, the Northeast has been one, and I mean, you know, but I think the in the late 50s, the Congress and Nehru definitely solved to some extent the problem in the South. I think, see, democracy is the key. How democratic you are, no matter how big or small the unit is. Pluralism is the key. How much you can accommodate diversity within the unit. I think these are much more important. If you whatever nation, whatever the size of the nation, if you're democratic and diverse and plural, I think it's fine. So my answer to the question is, to your question, is that I'm not sure. Honestly, I mean, in the last 10-15 years, our record is abysmal. And that is precisely because we've abandoned a certain kind of nation building project. Not that that wasn't exclusivist, I'm in agreement with you, but as I said, every step in the direction of an inclusive nation will involve, I mean, I wish we could take 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, because invariably it will never be a linear movement. Yeah, I mean, instead of taking 1 step forward and 2 steps backward, my hope is that we can take 2 steps forward and 1 step backward and move along like that, till we invent something completely new. I don't think we have reached that stage. When we've come, I think true federalism is the answer to India. I mean, I think the breakup of India is going to be a disaster. It will be full of violence. It will be full of dislocation. I mean, ethically, I think that would be much worse than a slightly exclusivist Nehru-Gandhi type of nation form that we tried to create in the early 50s. You know, I think it's moral reasoning has to be contextual and comparative, and unless we can think concretely of a new form of a new state form and a new form that, you know, we can't live without what we probably call anthropologically culture. Some new form of how to combine these and democracy and diversity. I think it's from that angle that I come to this, you know, going back in some ways to a revised view of the nation. If we have a better alternative sometime in the near future, which is going to be less violent, which is going to be, you know, more ethical, I will switch sides and come to your view. At the moment, I don't see that.
Thank you.
I don't see that we are going to create a better future for ourselves if we have a million separatist mutinies. I think there's going to be a huge violence and there's going to be a lot of loss of lives, as we did, of course, in 1947. So I think for purely consequentialist reasons, I would hope to keep posing my faith in something which is increasingly more inclusive, knowing full well that every stride that you take towards inclusion is going to bring in more exclusion. That's the nature of, that's the way it is. So you've got to constantly be on the guard. No new exclusion, and you have to include them, then there will be something else. It's never going to be, human beings will never fully control things. They'll never be able to plan things to the T, which is why probably we invent God, and we keep we have to find ways of reconciling with our finitude and with our corrigibility, and there is no way that we can produce a perfect world. There's no utopia. So no point in comparing the best of what we had with a utopia. We have to compare the best of what we had with the worst of what we had, and hope to build something which is towards the best and perhaps at some stage better than that, and not to regress into something which is really quite horrific, more violent. You look at what happened in the partition. 2 million lives lost, 10 million people displaced. Surely you don't want any of that, just for the sake of some rejection of some idea of the nation, of a non-ethnic nation, by the way. So,
On that note, shall we call it a day? If there are no further
Yes.
questions.
The books are available for sale outside.
will you take that conversation after?
Yeah, take it off stage.
Thank you so much for both of you and for everybody here for
Thank you,
spending your
Bhargava.
evening with us. Thank you so much. The books are available for sale outside.